Jaws didn't just terrify a generation, it changed movies forever, but behind the camera, it was pure chaos. A mechanical shark that almost sank, and a pansy deft, the production actors who couldn't stand each other, and a surprise appearance by a real dead body that floated onto the set. Yeah, this movie wasn't just intense on screen. From exploding sharks to improvised lines that became legends, here are 20 of the weirdest, wildest, and downright shocking facts about Jaws that even die-hard fans don't know. Fact 1. The shark had a name. Believe it or not, the shark had a name, and no, it wasn't Jaws. The crew called the mechanical beast Bruce, named after director Steven Spielberg's lawyer, Bruce Raymer. But Bruce wasn't exactly cooperative. The 25-foot animatronic shark was a nightmare to work with. It constantly sank, jammed, and broke down, especially in saltwater, which it wasn't even built for. The malfunctions were so bad, Spielberg barely got any usable footage of the shark, and that changed everything. Instead of showing the monster outright, he had to rely on shadows, water ripples, and that haunting music, and that made it even scarier. Fact 2. Spielberg thought Jaws would end his career. You'd think directing Jaws would feel like a dream, right? For Spielberg, it felt more like a nightmare. Between the constant delays, broken shark, and going wildly over budget, Spielberg was convinced this movie would ruin him. He's admitted in interviews that during filming, he'd go home and cry, thinking he'd never work again. At just 27 years old, Spielberg felt like he was in way over his head directing a blockbuster with no working monster, no finished script, and a furious studio breathing down his neck. Little did he know the disaster he feared would become one of the greatest movies of all time. Fact 3. The shark wasn't supposed to explode.
Fire, you son of a...
That jaw-dropping final moment where Brody fires a rifle, hits the scuba tank, and blows the shark to pieces, yeah, that wasn't supposed to happen. In the original script, and in Peter Benchley's novel, the shark simply bleeds out and dies after being stabbed and harpooned. No explosion, no action movie ending, but Spielberg wanted something bigger, something unforgettable. He later admitted the explosion wasn't realistic, but said, "I don't care how the shark dies, as long as it dies spectacularly." Fact 4. The first victim was in real pain. That terrifying opening scene where Chrissy is dragged through the water and screams for her life. It wasn't all acting. Susan Backlany, the stunt woman who played Chrissy, was strapped into a hidden harness connected to ropes. The crew violently yanked her back and forth without warning on Spielberg's orders. He wanted genuine fear. So he told the team not to tell her when the pulls were coming. What you hear in that scene, the gasps, the panic, the pain, is shockingly real. She later said she actually thought she was drowning. Fact 5. A real corpse floated onto the Jaws set. You expect fake blood and rubber limbs on a horror movie set. But during the filming of Jaws, something real and horrifying showed up. While shooting beach scenes on Martha's Vineyard, the crew got word that a real human body had washed ashore just a few miles down from the set. It was the body of a man who drowned days earlier. The production briefly paused as authorities arrived, but it added a deeply unsettling layer to an already intense shoot, especially for a film about people being eaten alive in the water. Fact 6. The mayor's ridiculous jacket wasn't a costume.
Where in the world will tell you it's a killer? It's a man-eater.
Look, the situation is that apparently a great white...
Remember Mayor Vaughn's outrageous blazer? The one covered in little anchors? It looks like something a costume designer would have made to scream, "I love the ocean." But here's the twist. That was his actual jacket. Actor Murray Hamilton brought it from his personal wardrobe. It wasn't planned or styled by the costume team. It just happened to be perfectly absurd for the role. The production loved it so much, they told him to keep wearing it, turning it into one of the most unintentionally iconic pieces of wardrobe in movie history. Fact 7. Quint's monologue was based on a real-life shark horror.
Lieutenant Illegaly just delivered the bomb, the Hiroshima bomb.
When Quint delivers that haunting speech about the sinking of the USS Indianapolis, it's not just a movie drama, it's based on a real horrific event. In 1945, the USS Indianapolis was torpedoed after delivering parts of the atomic bomb. Over 1,100 men went into the water. Sharks came almost immediately. For 4 days, the survivors were attacked non-stop. Only 316 men made it out alive.
Shark comes the nearest man, that man he start pounding and hollering and screaming. Sometimes the shark would go away. Sometimes he wouldn't go away.
Robert Shaw's chilling monologue was partially improvised and delivered in a single take, and it hit so hard because it was grounded in truth. It's one of the most unforgettable moments in the film because it actually happened. Fact 8. The final scene had to be shot in secret.
Hey, what day is this?
That quiet, peaceful final shot where Brody and Hooper paddle back to shore, it looks simple, but Spielberg had to sneak it in. By the end of production, time and money were gone. So instead of scheduling another big shoot, Spielberg took a tiny part of the crew, the 2 actors, and filmed the scene without having all the permits, extras, or studio approval. No lighting setups, no crowd, just a handheld camera, 2 men in the water, and Spielberg calling the shots on the fly. It was fast, cheap, and partially illegal. But it worked, and it gave the movie the calm, satisfying ending it desperately needed. Fact 9. The most famous line was improvised.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
It's the most quoted line from Jaws, and it wasn't in the script. Actor Roy Scheider improvised it on sets, and the crew loved it so much they started slipping it into scenes as an inside joke. The line was originally something the crew said behind the scenes whenever production was falling apart, especially when they literally didn't have a big enough boat to fit all the equipment. Spielberg finally kept it in during one of Brody's panicked moments, and just like that, movie history was made. Fact 10. Spielberg ran away from the final shot. Most directors celebrates when filming wraps, but Spielberg, he bailed. On the last day of shooting, Spielberg left the set early on purpose because he was afraid of getting thrown into the ocean as a prank. It had become a tradition on Martha's Vineyard, toss the director in the water once the movie wraps. Spielberg wasn't having it. As soon as the final shot was rolling, he jumped in a boat and literally escaped the island before the crew could catch him. Even after filming one of the greatest thrillers of all time, he still wasn't taking any chances. Fact 11. They used a real shark and a tiny stuntman. Some of the most terrifying shark footage in Jaws didn't come from a prop, it came from a real great white. Spielberg hired Australian shark experts Ron and Valerie Taylor to film live shark footage underwater. But to make the shark look massive, they pulled a clever trick. They put a stuntman who was under 5 feet tall into a miniature shark cage, creating the illusion that the shark was absolutely enormous. In one take, the shark actually got tangled in the cage and started thrashing violently. It looks so terrifying that Spielberg rewrote the script to include the footage in the final cut. Fact 12. These 2 actors couldn't stand each other. Quint and Hooper might have worked together on screen, but off screen, it was a war. Robert Shaw, who played Quint, and Richard Dreyfuss, Hooper, had constant tension on set. Shaw was a seasoned stage actor, intense, unpredictable, and sometimes drunk. Dreyfuss, young and outspoken, didn't back down. Shaw would mock Dreyfuss between takes, call him names, and even dared him to throw a glass through a window, which he did. At one point, Spielberg had to separate them just to keep filming going. But here's the twist. That real-life tension made their on-screen dynamic even better. Sometimes the best chemistry comes from actual conflict. Fact 13. The shark is barely in the movie. For a film about a killer shark, you hardly ever see the shark. In total, the great white only appears on screen for about 4 minutes in the entire 2-hour movie. That wasn't the plan. The mechanical shark was supposed to be the star, but it kept breaking. It sank, jammed, and flat out refused to work in salt water. So Spielberg had to improvise. He relied on ominous music, underwater point of view shots, and subtle ripples on the surface to build suspense. Ironically, the broken shark forced him to be more creative, and that's exactly what made Jaws so terrifying. Sometimes what you don't see is the scariest part. Fact 14. Spielberg hid under his seat at the first screening. Before anyone saw Jaws, Spielberg was terrified. At the first test screening, he was so anxious he didn't even sit with the audience. He crouched down behind a theater seat, too scared to watch their reactions. After months of production hell, broken sharks, missed deadlines, and blown budgets, he thought the film would bomb. Then the movie started. The screen went black as Chrissy swam into the ocean. And when that first attack hit, the crowd screamed. Spielberg slowly peeked over the seat, and what he saw wasn't a disaster. It was pure entertainment panic. People were clutching their chairs, jumping out of their seats. Fact 15, the jump scare was added after filming ended. One of the most shocking moments in Jaws wasn't even in the original movie. Remember when Hooper dives underwater and suddenly a severed head floats out of the wrecked boat? That scene made audiences jump out of their seats, and it was added after production had wrapped. Spielberg wasn't satisfied with the scares during test screenings. So he paid for a reshoot out of his own pocket, filmed the head popping out and someone swimming swimming pool and edited it back in. That single shot turned a suspenseful scene into a full-on jump scare classic. Sometimes the best moments come after you think you're done. Fact 16. Spielberg laughed at the music at first. The Jaws theme song is one of the most iconic pieces of film music ever made. 2 notes and suddenly your heart's in your throat. But when John Williams first played the theme for Spielberg on piano, Spielberg laughed. He thought it was a joke. It was so simple, so repetitive. It sounded like something a kid might bang out for fun. But then it started to sink in. That slow, relentless rhythm sounded exactly like something lurking beneath the surface, getting closer and closer. Spielberg later said the score was half the movie's success. Fact 17. The shark's death broke all the rules. The final scene in Jaws is pure movie legend. Brody climbs onto the sinking mast, rifle shaking in his hands, the shark charging straight at him. He mutters, "Smile, you son of a..." Then the shark explodes in a fiery blast of blood and seawater. It's thrilling, it's iconic, and it's also completely unrealistic. Compressed air tanks don't explode like that when you shoot them. The crew knew it, the studio knew it, but Spielberg stood by the scene. He said, "If I've got him for 2 hours, they'll believe it in the last 5 minutes." And he was right. Audiences didn't care about the science. They cared about the satisfaction. Fact 18. Jaws was inspired by a real shark attack. As terrifying as Jaws is, it was actually based on something even scarier, something real. In 1916, a series of brutal shark attacks struck the coast of New Jersey. Over the course of just 12 days, 4 people were killed and 1 seriously injured, sparking mass panic across the region. Beaches were closed. Armed men patrolled the shore. Some people even dynamited the water. The idea that a rogue shark could stalk and kill multiple people, that wasn't just fiction. It had already happened. Decades later, author Peter Benchley used those real events as the foundation for his novel, Jaws, which Spielberg later adapted into the film. So, while the movie may seem like over-the-top Hollywood horror, its roots are planted in a true story that terrified the East Coast long before the cameras rolled. Fact 19. Spielberg almost quit before the final scene. After months of stress, delays, and constant shark malfunctions, Steven Spielberg was done. He had wrapped principal photography in Martha's Vineyard and was headed back to Los Angeles, convinced someone else would film the final scene. He was terrified the studio would pull a Jaws 2 on him, meaning they'd bring in a second director to shoot the ending, just like what happened to other filmmakers at the time. Spielberg didn't want his name on a movie someone else had finished, so at the last minute, he changed his mind and flew back to the set. He personally directed the iconic final showdown with Brody on the mast, rifle in hand, and that unforgettable shark explosion. If he hadn't returned, the film's most legendary moment might have looked very different. Fact 20. Jaws changed Hollywood forever. Before Jaws, summer wasn't blockbuster season. In fact, studios used to dump low-priority films during the summer months, assuming people would rather be outside than at the movies. But Jaws changed all of that. When it hit theaters in June 1975, it exploded into a cultural phenomenon. Lines wrapped around city blocks. People saw it multiple times. It became the first movie in history to earn over $100 million at the box office. And it did it fast. Studios took notice. Suddenly, summer became prime real estate for big-budget, high-stakes thrill ride. Without Jaws, there's no Star Wars, no Jurassic Park, no Marvel Cinematic Universe. At least, not in the way we know them. Jaws may have started as a mess behind the scene, but it changed movie history forever. From exploding sharks to real corpses, this film was pure chaos and absolute genius. If you enjoyed the ride, don't forget to like, comment your favorite fact, and subscribe for more deep dives into classic films. Share this video with someone who still won't swim in the ocean. There's always more lurking beneath the surface.